In the spring of 1901, a Greek sponge diver named Ilias Stadiatis dropped 45 meters below the surface near a small island called Antikythera. He came back up shaking. At the bottom, he said, was a heap of rotting bodies. When a crew of archaeologists investigated, they found one of the largest ancient shipwrecks ever discovered. A Roman cargo vessel sunk around 70 BC, carrying bronze statues, glass, pottery, and jewelry. And buried in the debris, something nobody expected. A corroded, barnacle-covered lump of bronze, about the size of a shoebox. They pulled it out, logged it as artifact number 15,087, and almost didn't think twice about it. That almost discarded chunk of metal turned out to be the most sophisticated mechanical device ever built in the ancient world. A device so advanced that nothing matching its complexity would appear for another 1,400 years. This is its story. For 50 years, artifact 15,087 sat in a museum drawer in Athens, barely studied, barely noticed. The bronze was so corroded and compacted that scientists couldn't make out what it was. A few researchers noted that it seemed to have gears of some kind, but ancient Greece didn't have gears like this, so most assumed they were mistaken. It wasn't until 1951 that a British historian named Derek de Sala Price looked at it differently. He arranged for the fragments to be X-rayed. What the X-rays showed stopped him cold. Inside the corroded bronze were at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precision cut, with hand-filed teeth, assembled in a configuration that modern engineers still marvel at. Some of the gear teeth were less than a millimeter apart. Price published his findings in 1959. The scientific community largely didn't believe him. He spent the rest of his career trying to prove that a device of this mechanical complexity had actually existed in 150 BC, and that it had been deliberately engineered to do something extraordinary. He was right. And it would take the rest of the 20th century, and eventually artificial intelligence, to fully understand what. The mechanism survives today in 82 fragments, held at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. The largest fragment is about the size of your palm. But over the past 30 years, using increasingly sophisticated imaging technology, researchers have pieced together a picture of what this device actually looked like when it was whole. It was housed in a wooden box, roughly the size of a large hardcover book. On the front face was a large bronze dial showing the Greek zodiac and the Egyptian calendar. On the back were two spiral dials, one tracking a 19-year lunar cycle, one tracking a 223-month eclipse prediction cycle. And inside? A system of gears so precisely designed that it could model the irregular orbit of the moon around the Earth, accounting for the fact that the moon moves faster when it's closer to Earth and slower when it's farther away. Let me be clear about how remarkable that is. The ancient Greeks knew the moon's orbit wasn't perfectly circular, and they built a mechanical model of that irregularity using a pin and slot mechanism that is mathematically equivalent to how we calculate lunar motion today. In 150 BC with bronze gears, carved by hand. So what could you actually do with this machine? What was it for? Turn the hand crank on the side, and every pointer, every dial, every indicator moved in precise coordination. Function 1. Track the position of the sun and moon in the zodiac, so you always knew exactly where they were in the sky on any date, past or future. Function 2. Predict lunar and solar eclipses up to 100 years in advance, using the 223-month Saros cycle that Babylonian astronomers had discovered centuries earlier. The mechanism even predicted the color of the eclipse and whether it was likely to be visible from your location. Function 3. Display the positions of the 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Function 4. Track the 4-year Olympic cycle, which of the 4 major Greek games was coming next. The Olympics, the Pythian Games, the Isthmian Games, or the Nemean Games. Think about what you're holding in your hands. If you own this device in 150 BC, you can predict eclipses that terrified entire civilizations. You can navigate by the stars with perfect precision. You can plan religious festivals years in advance. You have essentially a pocket universe. And crucially, you don't need to be an astronomer to use it. You just turn the crank. Here's the part of this story that most people don't know, and the part that AI just helped unlock. When the mechanism was recovered from the shipwreck, it was already broken into fragments. The front of the device, the side with what researchers believe was the most complex display, is almost entirely missing. 2 millennia underwater had destroyed it. For decades, scientists argued over what was supposed to be there. The inscriptions on the surviving fragments described planetary motions, but the gears to model those planets were gone. In 2021, a team at University College London, led by Professor Tony Freeth, published a landmark reconstruction using an eye-assisted analysis. What they found was astonishing. The missing front panel contained a planetarium, a system of concentric rings and pointers that displayed all 5 known planets simultaneously, all moving at the correct speeds relative to each other, all driven by a single hand crank. Building this mechanism required solving a mathematical problem that wasn't formally solved until the Renaissance. The Greeks did it mechanically, intuitively, in bronze. Professor Freeth said that the ancient Greeks used their mathematical genius to try to understand the cosmos and to make models of it. And that genius is wrapped up in this little box. They built a model of the universe, by hand, 2,000 years ago. And we only know the full extent of what they built because of artificial intelligence. So who made it? That question has never been definitively answered, but the leading theory points to one of the greatest minds in human history. Archimedes of Syracuse, the mathematician and inventor who calculated pi, developed the principles of the lever and designed war machines. So terrifying that Roman soldiers reportedly refused to fight on the coast of Sicily. Ancient texts describe Archimedes building mechanical orreries, devices that modeled the movements of the celestial bodies. When the Romans sacked Syracuse in 212 BC, the Roman general Marcellus reportedly took 2 of these devices as prize trophies. The Antikythera Mechanism was recovered from a ship sailing from the eastern Mediterranean, likely in the 1st century BC, possibly carrying Greek artifacts looted by Roman collectors. It was heading toward Italy. The timing, the origin, the sophistication, all point toward the tradition of Archimedes. It may not have been built by Archimedes himself, but it was almost certainly built by people who learned from him, and that brings us to the darkest part of this story. Here's what haunts me about the Antikythera Mechanism. It represents a level of mechanical precision and mathematical sophistication that didn't appear again in human history for 1,400 years. The next device of comparable complexity was a medieval astronomical clock built in Europe in the 14th century. That's not a gap. That's a collapse. What happened to the tradition of craftsmen who could build this? What happened to the schools, the workshops, the accumulated knowledge of how to cut gears to this precision, how to design a differential gear train, how to translate astronomical mathematics into mechanical motion? Most historians point to the accumulated disasters of the late ancient world. The fall of the Western Roman Empire, the destruction of the Library of Alexandria, centuries of instability that broke the chains of knowledge transmission. And here's why this matters to a channel about the future. This has happened before. Advanced knowledge, hard-won, brilliantly conceived, can be lost, not in centuries, sometimes in decades. Sometimes in a single generation that doesn't write things down, or that loses its institutions, or that faces a crisis it can't survive. The people who built the Antikythera Mechanism were the leading edge of their civilization, and the knowledge they carried didn't survive them. We are right now living through the fastest technological acceleration in human history. The question isn't just what we're building. It's what we're doing to make sure it persists. The Antikythera Mechanism sits in a climate-controlled case in Athens. You can go see it. A corroded, barnacle-scarred box of bronze gears that modeled the entire known universe, built 2,000 years ago, by people who understood that the cosmos was predictable, mechanical, and worth understanding. They were the tech wonders of their age. If this video made you see the ancient world differently, subscribe, because that's exactly what this channel is about. The technologies that shape the past, the technologies reshaping the present, and the ones that are going to define what comes next.